Thank you so much to everyone for joining us this morning. Paths to Publications is back. We're so excited to be here today with Dr. Lewis. For those who are new to Paths to Publication, this is a virtual event which is hosted by Center for Research and Development in Dual Language and Literacy Acquisition, the ELRC Education Outreach, and the Graduate Student Advisory Council on everything that graduates need to know regarding writing, publishing, research, grants, and the graduate experience. I'm your host, Marine Kashyap-Gayas. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat box, and we will surely get to those during the later part of our discussion. And with that, I would like to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Chance Lewis. Dr. Lewis is the Carol Grotnes-Balk Distinguished Professor and founding Executive Director of the Urban Education Collaborative and International Conference on Education at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. Dr. Lewis has over 100 publications in some of the leading journals in urban education and has 30 books that he has edited and co-edited. And he's received over $7 million in extramural research funding, along with a plethora of presentations across the globe. Thank you, Dr. Lewis, for joining. Over to you for more insights for our audience.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the warm introduction. I hope everyone is doing well. For those of you who are in Texas, hopefully you made it through the cold snap there as well. Same here. I'm actually in Charlotte right now, so we have the same situation here going on as well. But I'm honored to be able to spend a few moments with you today to talk about a topic that I'm definitely passionate about as well with you on your particular academic journeys, your career journeys around publications and getting out the work that you want to do as well. I just wanted to share a few thoughts for today. So the way I'll structure today's presentation is I'll provide in my limited time today 10 tips that I think are important for you to consider, and then some recommendations as you consider your pathway forward. And you can ask me questions as you kind of think about where you want to go based off of the information that is shared today. So I'll just share a little bit, and you'll get this information afterwards as well. But I want to share a little bit in talking about preparing to publish and why that is important for each of you in the work that you do as well. A little bit about my background. I'm from the great state of Louisiana, so I'm not far from where you all are as well. I was a high school teacher, and in my high school teaching days, I taught 4 years of high school there, and then I was fortunate enough to receive Teacher of the Year for the state of Louisiana my last year there. So my journey has taken me I did my doctoral studies at Colorado State University and started off as an assistant professor there. I actually spent 5 years at Texas A&M University, being an endowed chair there in the TLAC department, and also I was one of the previous co-directors for the Center for Urban School Partnerships there. So I know Texas A&M pretty well, and I've been here in Charlotte since 2011, leading our urban education PhD program and directing our center for urban education as well, that we call the Urban Education Collaborative. So let's jump right in. I know you're here to get some tips and strategies for publishing. And I want to start off today in our discussion, kind of talking about in my years in doing this. I will start off with a few excuses I usually hear, not only from from my own students, but as I travel across the country and across the globe in doing different things to support doctoral students as well. And you can enter into the chat if you've ever heard any of these as well. You can do thumbs up or whatever you would like to put in the chat. But excuse number one that I hear when it comes to publishing is number one, I don't have time. right? And, people say I'm just too busy. I would love to write more, but if I just had more time, right, then I could get more work done as well. And there's a lot of questions we could ask around that, but that's one excuse I usually hear when it comes to publications. The second excuse I usually hear out there is I'm not a good writer. Okay. And so put a comment in the chat if you've ever heard someone say, I'm not a good writer, or you may sometimes feel that you're not a good writer because nobody is born knowing, right? Academic writing, right? It's just something that, we have to work at and start to see and really understand the nuances of academic writing as well. Okay. The third excuse I usually hear out there is I don't have support. Okay. And each person, kind of defines support differently, but give us a few thoughts if you've ever heard that, or you may feel that way as well, because sometimes, it can be an isolating experience, as you kind of think about academic writing as well. Okay. So even if I do feel I have time, or I do feel I'm a fairly decent writer, or I do have support, sometimes then I go into the next one is I don't know what to write, right? So I'm here in the space, I've tried to do all the things that you're supposed to do, but I'm not exactly sure what I should write as well. And then finally, um, where do I get started? So how many of you have felt that way? Like if I just knew where to get started, I would love to do it. It sounds great. If someone just told me where to get started, I would love to do that as well. Okay. And so across these five thoughts for today, this is where we're going to kind of center our discussion for a few minutes. So, like I said, I'm going to give you 10 strategies and you can take note of them. You take screenshots or whatever, works for you as well. But as we start to look at this, one thing I want us to consider in our first strategy, I want you to capture the strategy so you can move forward. So, strategy one, I want you to think about and understand your why related to being a strong and prolific writer. Okay. Because before you write a word on the paper, what is your why around that? Why are you writing? Okay. Are you only writing because it's required for class? Are you writing because you heard it's a good thing, right? Or are you writing because you want to make an impact? Okay. And when you think about your why related to this is going to be very important for you. So as you look at this in the whys, I want you to think about your passion. Okay. As you start to look at passion, and you'll get copies of the slides at the end, but something, if you're going to be prolific in the writing, something must bother you, right? So much that it amplifies your why, and only you can, contribute to that particular issue, right? So you think about also the fire in the belly, as I call it. Does it wake you up in the morning or force you to stay up at night? This why, this issue, right? Okay. Do you want to stand out from other faculty if you're a faculty member that's on here? Do you want to stand out from other graduate students as well? All of that is important for you to consider. A key thought, and which was what I was doing right before I got on here, being on the search committee. For those of you who want your writing to position you for your career path, average right now is about 70 applications per assistant professor position. I was just on this search committee just now, and we had 90 people apply for the position as well. So what will stand out, right, for you? In your work, it has to come down to a why, right? People have to know that you have a why around your work, what you want to be known for, but then do you desire to be a key contributor in your field? Okay. And when we talk about this, if research is not necessarily your thing, that's okay, right? Also, there are different pathways to publications, right? So some people may want to be professors when they graduate, and they may target academic journals, right? Some may want to be practitioners, and they may want to target practitioner journals or practitioner outlets. So whatever it is, you have to think about it, in such a way that your why drives you. And one of the things for me when I started on my particular journey, I had this personally, I had this takeover mentality because I was so passionate about my why. I wanted to get in every major urban education outlet because that's my particular field where people go. So whether it was researchers, what were they reading, or were practitioners reading, wherever people went around the topic that I was doing, I wanted my name to be in that space so they could highlight the work, right? But the why drove that, not just publishing for publishing's sake as well. Okay. So what I want you to do as you kind of think about this, and I kind of see some of the comments going in the chat, is I want you to think about while we're thinking about this, if you know what your why is, right? Put it in the chat because sometimes you just writing it down and you seeing it out there, as well, helps amplify your fire to do the work as well. So strategy number one is, know your why. Okay. So as you kind of think about that, I want you to think about from that particular standpoint, creating this culture of scholarly production for yourself. Okay. So as you start to think about this as well. So I remember specifically when I was in third grade, my third grade teacher told me, one of them told me that you don't write well, right? And you heard in the introduction, like here we are, 30 books later, we could just kind of go down the line as well. And as you start to look at that, this is just an example of how your why can drive you, right? I'm no different from any of you that are on here, right? I just found my why, understood it, and wanted to work through it as well. Okay. So that's strategy number one, knowing your why. Okay. Strategy number two, I want you to consider is successfully being able to manage yourself, right? And the demands on your time. Okay. And the reason why I say this is going to be important because you have to, if you're going to think about this, like with the name of the series, this Pathways to Publication, you're also going to have to think about the you side of it. Okay. You're going to have to be able to manage you to be productive as well. And what I mean by that is, you have to have strong self-discipline to be a writer, right? Okay. You have to be able to write when people don't tell you to write. Okay. And do you have the strong self-discipline to do that? Okay. So just a quick question, and you could put it out there in the chat for some of you. Where do you write best? Right? Do you write best at home? Right. I know you probably have some coffee shop writers in here, in other places. But if you know where you write best, right, put it in the chat from the standpoint of, I know if I could get to that place, I know I could get something done. Okay. But you have to know that about yourself. Okay. But here are a couple of other key questions that I do want you to consider. What do you need to happen for you to get in your zone, as I call it, your writing zone? Okay. Because like I normally tell my students here in Charlotte, a lot of times people spend a lot of time getting ready to get in their zone, but then when they get there, then they don't do anything with it, right? They'll get their computer, get to their favorite coffee shop, get their favorite coffee, everything is right, and then they get distracted. Okay. So you got to have self-discipline and being able to get into your zone as well, but also understanding how do you handle distractions. Okay. And you have to understand what are necessary distractions and unnecessary distractions as well. Okay. So let's just do a question where you could just tell me the truth since we're hanging out for this moment. Okay. How many of you have been in your writing zone and something popped up on your phone and distracted you and you never came back from that in that writing session? Just put yes or no. Right. And as we start to look at that, we can look at the chats and see the messages as well, because that's what I'm talking about when I say necessary and unnecessary distractions. Okay. So as you deal with your why, I want to show you some things that you're going to have to deal with before we even get into the components of the writing piece as well. Okay. So as we look at this, I want us to think about for a minute the demands on your time. Okay. So as a writer, you have to be able to balance these things. So whether it's personal commitments, family commitments, work, life, balance, if you're working on your thesis or dissertation or whatever it is, all of these are demands, on your particular time that you have to consider as well. So as you start to think about this, and think about these demands on your time, you have to also think about, how you're going to balance these things in your writing process. Okay. So how many of you put in the chat if you are like an early morning person, right? Or if you are a late night writer, okay, or you're a midday writer, okay? Because oftentimes what I usually see is sometimes people are trying to write in zones or in pockets that they're not their best self, right? Okay. And so if you're an early morning person, but you try to, write at night, it's just not going to work, right? And so as you start to look at it as well. So for me, I'm one of those early morning people. I'm the 3 a.m., 4 a.m. person as well. And pretty much everything that I've written in my career, including things this morning that I had to do, everything is written before 7 a.m. Right? Because for me, as a husband and a father, and one of my, at the time when they were small, my kids were small, once they woke up, it was over, right? So for me, I had to get everything that I needed to from what I called on my side the intellectual out, and done for that particular day before they wake up as well. But all of these are demands on your time, and you got to think about how you want to manage that as well. But also, you have to think about, and I'm just talking about the you component of being a writer as well. You're also going to have to deal with stressful situations and learn how to reduce your stress. Okay. Because what I often see also is people trying to write all day, and that's not going to work either. Okay. Or you're writing too big of trying to do other big chunks as well. But you got to have other things that you can kind of take your mind off writing. So when you come back to it, you're in a zone where you could do it. So that could be exercise or personal reading, vacations, hobbies, social times with friends, social time with peers. For me, I'm a cyclist as well. So, I mean, for me, I'm going to get in my 150, 200 miles a week, no matter what, right? But the production time is still going to be there because I have a pocket kind of scheduled, for production. Okay. So, what I want you to think about is where on your calendar, right, have you scheduled, right, productivity? Okay. So, if you look at your calendar for 7 days, what does it look like for productivity as well? Okay. So I want you to just kind of think about that as you move forward as well. So strategy number one is the why, right? Strategy number two is dealing with the you side of it as well. Okay. So then when we get to strategy number three, one of the things I want you to think about, as you move forward is now as we move into the writing phase of it is the organization piece. Okay. So how are you going to organize yourself and your time to be productive as well? And in looking at that, some things I want you to consider, what I call the mindset of the scholar, which was I was alluding to earlier, the mindset of the scholar. So I want you to think about, if you don't remember anything else I say today, one of the things I want you to think about is organizing your schedule for productivity. Okay. And I'm going to give you a homework assignment. You don't have to turn it in, right? But you will hear your voice, you will hear my voice to you if you don't do it. Okay. But what I want you to do, I want you to organize your schedule for productivity. So what I want you to do is lay out 7 days, okay? And I want you to basically schedule everything. Okay. So I want you to schedule time where you're going to be productive, schedule time for class, schedule time that you're going to hang out with family, schedule time for to do nothing. If you're going to do nothing, at least schedule it. Put in your calendar nothing, right? But whatever it is, right? I want it to be scheduled because I want you to be able to see it, right? And then when you know exactly what time that your productivity will happen. Okay. Because this is the foundation of what I call developing a system of productivity as well. So that's the homework assignment. Lay out 7 days. Okay. And I want you to put in blocks of time, right, where you're going to be productive, okay? In the time slots that you are at your best. So if you're early morning, put the writing times as well, okay? And so I'm not saying that you have to write every day, okay? But I am saying you have to know in the 7 days when you're going to write, okay? And let me define what I mean by writing in the block. So you may just say, okay, I'm gonna put in an hour tomorrow. Okay. So in that writing block, what you're looking at, that writing block consists of things you need to read, but then you also have an assignment with yourself of this is what I need to get down on paper. Okay. So you just have to get it down. You can go back and edit it later. Okay. The hardest part is the creativity. Okay, getting it down in whatever form or fashion that you need to as well, and then go with it from there. So my strategy has been, and you'll develop your own strategy as you move forward. My strategy was, any writing block time that I have, a minimum that I must produce is 2 pages. Okay, so if I produce 2 pages in that block, okay, I'm not editing it, I'm just getting it out on paper. And if I write for 6 days, that's 12 pages a week. Okay. Times 4 weeks in a month, right? There you go with 48 pages right there, right? But it's being systematic and knowing exactly what I have to get out of the block. Okay. So if I'm getting out that 2 pages a day, then when I go back and edit it, I have roughly just say 48 pages to work with at the end of the month as well. Okay. Now, one kind of challenge that I see people doing as they think about writing is they're overzealous in what they feel they will produce in the block. Okay. Most people's attention spans are small, and they get smaller as more and more distractions happen, as well. But as you start to look at this, what I want you to consider is that I don't want you to bring undue stress on yourself. So, any doctoral students on here today? Most, okay, a lot of them. Okay. Don't say things like this anymore, right? Based off of what you heard today. I don't want you to say something like, I'm going to sit down and write chapter 2 today. Okay. That's not going to happen. Okay. Okay. For you to sit down and write an entire chapter 2, it won't happen in a day, right? But what you can say, I'm working on chapter 2. Okay. And am I working on chapter 2? Okay. I know today a piece of that, 2 pages of that, or whatever you decide for your productivity in the block, here's what will happen today, right? Which will lead to the bigger goal. Okay. So as you look at that 7 day calendar, you can also, when you look at your writing blocks, you can also say, hey, in this particular block, this is what I know I'm going to produce that is realistic for you and the time that you have as well. Okay. So hopefully that is something that you can start to think about and consider is this is part of this developing a system, right? That I want you to consider, in your calendar as you start to move forward as well. Okay. So So, for example, here's something I want you all to think about. So, how many of you in addition to, for doctoral students, if you're on here, in addition to your dissertations or master's thesis or what have you, how many of you would love to publish articles, and all the books and all the things you kind of see out there? Okay. So, given that from what I see on the screen, you're going to have to develop a system. Okay. So, what I want you to look at here, and you could go back and listen to the video if they share it with you, is that for every project that you take on, a couple of things I want you to understand is you don't have enough time, right, to write everything yourself. Okay. So you want to start to think about who are people that I can collaborate with, who are people that are like-minded, and I'll talk more about that at the end. But what I have on the screen here is, a system of for publications, what I call 1 through 10. Okay. And so as you start to think about it, so let's just take people that are in your program, right? As you examine people in your classes, and let's just say you're in this mindset of, I want to be, I want to make significant contributions, right? And what you're doing is kind of scanning others, in your classes and your programs, across programs who may have a similar mindset. And let's just say you meet and you just say, hey, I would love to do something with you. Let's collaborate as well, right? You have to go into that with a strategy, right? So let's just say, you meet the correct person and you say, hey, let's do a, 2 article agreement with each other. Here's a part I could write, here's a part you could write. I heard your presentation in class. That'll be a good thing for us to collaborate on, with the research agenda that I have. And you start to make these connections and start to think about collaborative work that you can do with other people as well. Because what I often see a lot of times in higher education, people become so isolated that they think they have to do everything themselves, of course, but then also they don't really meet other people who can also expand, right, the research agenda, expand your reach in what you can do in the publications and the dissemination of your work. So as you start to think about people, first you have to show yourself productive, right? You have to first show yourself as a collaborator, right? But then you're going to start to also look for potential people that you can also collaborate with as well. And before you know it, it starts a ripple effect, right, of publications that you can start to get into the pipeline as well. So in developing this system for success, this is kind of where I want you to start. So it may not be your first 10 publications, but let's just say your first 2, right? You start to think about, okay, I'm working on this. I heard this person. Let's have a conversation and let's see what we can, put together. And then let's come up with an agreement of what we can do, as well. Okay. So that's another strategy that I want you to think about is more about the organization, right? And thinking about a system of what you can do as well. Okay. Strategy 4, really quick, is establishing a research agenda. Okay. And what I mean by research agenda is this is the area of work that you want to be known for in your career. Okay. And this is where I want to kind of pause for a minute and say, okay, when you think about what you want to be known for, a lot of people may have, several things that they're really interested in. Okay. But with your research agenda, I want to talk about what do you want to be known for in your work. Okay. And this is going to take a little bit of reflection because as you think about it, I want you to kind of think about like brand names. Okay. And in the brand names, there are certain brand names where you shop, right? Where you know what you're going to get. Okay. But as you start to look at your brand name, you could put, and here's a something that you could do as an exercise. You could put, your first and last name and put, I will be known for fill in the blank. Okay. And I want you to fill in that blank because that's what you want to kind of zone in on in the work that you do and being known for that. Okay. So when I talk about this analogy of ballpark, for many of you, some of you may have gone to the Aggie football games, right? And you have seats way at the top, right? And you have seats close to the field, right? But you're still at the game. right? And I use that analogy because there may be some topics that you explore that are near and dear to your heart very closely, okay? But then also you have a range to the nosebleed seats, right? That you're still interested in, okay, and that you could potentially collaborate on as well. So you got to think about what will be your range, okay, of topics that you would consider without tarnishing your brand as well. So when you think about the research agenda, think about one, what do you want to be known for? Not just doing that because somebody else said that you should do it, right? But going back to your why, okay, and the work that you want to put out there. What do you want to be known for in your work? And then what is your range? I call it your ballpark analogy from the seats that are closest to the field to the nosebleed section that you will stretch in their work and not tarnish the brand as well. Okay. So when you start to look at this, if anybody, is clear in what their research agenda is, they could just put it in the chat for us so people could see example. You could put your first and last name. I want to be known for and fill in the blank. Okay. And if you're not there yet, that's okay. That's why we're having these types of presentations to support you to get to that particular point. But that just gives you ideas of what you can do with that as well. Okay. All right, so let's go to strategy 5. And there are some other things that'll be on the slide that you could look at, but for time purposes, I want to make sure we get through it and maybe answer a few questions for people who may have any. Okay. So we are now, your research agenda now. So our next step that I want you to consider is you're going to have to know the publication outlets in your field, okay? And what your particular field values, okay? So, and what I mean by that is that you should talk with faculty mentors, librarians, and other collaborators about what are the key publication outlets in your field that can support your work. So if you're on a trajectory where you want to work in higher education and you want to do academic publications, you need to talk to these faculty mentors. You need to talk with your librarians and say, what are the key outlets in my field? Okay. And understanding what are the outlets, where are our people going when they look for information? Okay. What are the places that they seek this information? Okay. And then those outlets, you need to understand what they publish and when, how often do those publications come out, and devise your strategy as well. Okay, so when I was doing my particular strategy with me being, and I'll use this example, with me being in urban education, I knew what I call the top three, top four journals in the field, right? But then I knew some of the mid-level journals and I knew some of the lower tier journals as well. But in my strategy, I would say, okay, I'm gonna knock off the lower level, the middle level, and what I call the top tier level, as well. And I developed a strategy to put my work within and across categories. But I'm saying that to say is that I understood what the publications outlets were in my particular field and what the field was valuing and what they needed and understanding my why to add to the conversation as well. Okay. So if you know some of the key publication outlets in your field, or if you know an outlet that you would like to publish in, I'm big on putting it down so you can see it. If you have a key publication outlet that you want your work to appear in, just go ahead and put the name of it, in the chat, right? Because that'll let people know this is what I'm targeting. Other people in the chat may see it and say, hey, I was thinking about that too, as well. Is there opportunity for, collaboration, as well. But as you start to think about that, these are things that you have to know, on your pathway to being productive, as well. Okay. All right. Strategy number 6. Okay. And this is going to be what I call knowing the hierarchy, because now we know the outlets, right? But knowing the hierarchy of publications and their value in higher education. So somebody give us a thumbs up if you're planning a career in higher education and you want to be a professor, let's just say in a high research intensive school like a Texas A&M or equivalent, somewhere in the country as well. Okay, so let's just see what the chat kind of shows us as well. So we have some people that that is a goal, for them. Okay, now if you're going to do that, as the thumbs up come in, is that you can't just publish to publish if you're going to be in those spaces, okay? Because Texas A&M is where I got my tenure. Texas A&M is where I became a full professor. So one thing you're going to have to do, when you're there or in spaces like that, is understand the hierarchy. And on this slide, you can really kind of take a picture of this, is that, or look at it later. You have to understand the hierarchy of what Texas A&M and other schools like it, the high research intensive environments look for, right? So the what I call the platinum standard will always be referee journal articles in the key outlets in your field. Okay. That's always going to be number one. Okay. And so as you start to look at that, the previous comments that I've said about, knowing the outlets, knowing your why, doing your writing schedule, so on and so forth, leads you to this point, understanding the hierarchy. Okay. And in the hierarchy, is if you don't have referee journal articles, you won't be in the research institution long. Okay. And so as you start to look at that, that's always going to be the platinum standard. Okay. And what I call the next part of the hierarchy is, can you show yourself the ability to get external funding? Okay. Grants, and apply for funding, contracts, so on and so forth. Now, if you're a doc student, it may not necessarily be that you're getting grants at this point. You may be working with a faculty member on a grant, right? But also while you're there, you want to get experiences in doing that, because that will be what I call 1B, as well, as we start to look at that as well. Okay. So as we get ready to get to questions, I want you to think about that, and understanding that hierarchy as well. And then I'll close with this last thought before we go to the question as well. In my thoughts for today that I want you to consider, okay, is what I call this one right here. Okay. Collaborate with others. Okay. And you can't write with everybody. Okay. I want you to understand that. Okay. Your friends are not your writing partners. Okay. You need to find reliable people that you can look at as well. And then you're looking for people with a similar mindset. And the reason why I show this picture is that this group of guys, when we were in graduate school, we met each other, and we all made a commitment to each other at that time based off of everything that I mentioned to you today as well. Okay. And we said, based off of our production, what we wanted to do is all become full professors at research institutions, direct our own centers, get a lot of money through grants and collaborate, right? And what you're going to do is you're going to find people on your pathway that you could collaborate with. But once you get the right people, you could be very, very successful as well. But you have to go through some other people to find out who your people that you can write with will be as well. Okay. So I want to stop there and open up the floor for questions, because there are other things I can highlight, but I wanted to make sure in our limited time today, we answer any questions that you may have.
Sure. Thank you. It's been so insightful, Dr. Lewis, and I already see some hands. Please go ahead. I see Rarian Zori has raised a hand. Please go ahead. You can ask in person.
Thank you so much for that talk. I wanted to ask in terms of the strategies when it comes into collaborating with somebody, when you have that kind of like first initial meeting, I guess, to kind of discuss what it is, what do you think are some concrete things that you have to have an agreement about? So it's not just like a great idea that's put on paper and then forgotten about later on.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the thing that you want to have a discussion about, particularly in the first meeting, is one, what are we going to collaborate on, right? And come to agreement and talk about what each of you can bring to the table around that. But then also looking at what will the product be and where will the product go? Okay, I think that's going to be very, very important as well. You need to have that initial discussion, right? Also talk about areas of responsibility. Who will be responsible for what? Who will lead it? Who will be the second person on it, or so on and so forth, right? And then the deadline. Okay, so you must lead the initial meeting with the deadline of what each of you will bring to the table. And that will be the first kind of signal if you had a right person. All right. So if they miss the first deadline, it's highly likely they're going to be delayed on future deadlines as well. Okay. So it gives you a good kind of litmus test to see if it's the right person. And if it's not, that's okay. Cut your losses and keep moving on to the next person as well. Okay. Because a lot of people will sound good, but then when it's time to produce it, that's where we'll kind of slim down as well. A great question.
Thank you so much for that.
Yes.
Yes, Fabio, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Lewis. Very inspiring presentation. And I learned a lot, especially as a postdoc researcher who is currently trying to write something that is not nonsense.
Yes.
Anyway, yeah. I agree most of your points, but I have to say some of the suggestions, like figuring out the outlines of your field, know about the writing style of your field, from my experience with previously a doctoral students, I have to say it's hard to learn all those as a student. I mean, like knowing about your field, writing outlines sometimes can only be achieved under the consultation of a experienced professors or your advisor. So, is there any suggestion that you give to new researchers like me or doctoral students where to seek help and other than from their advisors and where they can find some professional consultations or maybe training even for their academic writing? Academic writing is not a one-day thing. So yeah, that's my question.
Yeah. So yeah, so let me try to answer. 'Cause you kind of have multiple points in the questions as well. So as you look at that, when you talk about when I said about knowing the outlets, right? So there are going to be key outlets in your field that are going to be important, right? And the reason why I say you want to know what they are so you can look at the writing styles and the research that's coming out of those, right? Because that kind of sets a benchmark of here's what's important in the field, here's what they're writing about. You can see the writing style, so on and so forth, right? Now, naturally, you would say, okay, with my dissertation advisor or my postdoc advisor or mentor, that would be my main person. But a lot of times, that's not the case for everybody, right? So there's certain things that you can do. So one, you have to take advantage of those kind of writing workshops that are offered, at the university, right? In the department, in the college, to understand that and get involved in that, right? But then also, when you look at people in the field, once you understand your why and the topics that you see, you may start to see people that are publishing work, in that particular area, which who may or may not be at your respective institution, right? And then, so as you start to look at, then as you start to get more comfortable and wanting to reach out, right? That's another pool of people that you could look at, right? You go to conferences, you may attend their presentations, and have discussions with them as well, because what you're trying to do is position yourself in the area of where you want to operate, and then show them based on your production that you're willing to collaborate, you're willing to put in the work, but then also position yourself with some of the senior faculty members, those that are out there publishing, getting grants as well, to show them, because as a professor, one of the things is that it brings us great joy to kind of mentor the next generation, as well. But a lot of times we wouldn't necessarily know that a person wanted that, right? If we don't know who they are, they don't reach out, especially if it's in a field that is related, as well. So to answer your question, as you start to look at it, understand the outlet and what they're putting out, understand who the people are in the area as well, and show yourself as a potential collaborator in that space. But then also, be willing, to participate in resources that are right around you, like those writing workshops and, all of those types of things, because it all helps as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lewis.
Yes. Dr. Lewis, I just have one quick question. So, $7 million of research funding that you've managed to attract. What strategies have you found to be most effective in securing and managing these external fundings?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I really kind of reflect back on my days at A&M. So my office was on the fourth floor in the College of Education building there. And what kind of started my journey in grants, and somebody told me something that I think was very important. They said, you know, start to stretch yourself a little bit outside of just what you see as what you want to be known for. So remember when I said the ballpark analogy, right? The seats that are closest to the field, to the nosebleed, right? And so once I kind of expanded, myself and the work that I wanted to do, and start to look at other people, right? And then said, okay, I see what they're bringing in. Then we started to collaborate. And then from that particular time, once I collaborated, then I began to understand, with some of the bigger funding opportunities that were out there, you wouldn't even be competitive if you were not collaborating with other people. They weren't even awarding, and it's still to this day, most funding opportunities are not provided to one particular person, right? It's provided to a team. Okay. It could be a team within a university, it could be a team across universities, right? And once I understood that I had to expand from that point to involve other people with a common goal, but they brought in different things to topics that we were addressing for grant proposals, then that changed everything, for me as well. When you start to look at going for external funding, but it didn't just start with the $1 million grants, right? It started with the smaller ones, like the mini grants, right? And then you kind of move up, from that particular point as well. But understand, whether it's in academic writing or grant proposals, you're going to have to develop your ability to collaborate and bring something to the table with others as well. Because once you have things with others, then you have opportunities to increase your chances for either publication or grant funding as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, that's very helpful. Of course, collaboration is the key. And
Yeah.
sometimes we want to collaborate not just with people, but with the purpose, what
Right.
their research purpose and the purpose to publish is. I'm not sure how many more questions we can take, but we will definitely be sharing Dr. Lewis's presentation and email details. So feel free to message him. I'll quickly share my screen. So feel free to email me or my colleague, Christina Hull. You see these email addresses here. Thank you so much, Dr. Chance Lewis. It has been such an honor and such a pleasure to learn some of these tips and strategies, and we really wish and hope that we continue on this path alongside some of these very valuable suggestions and the hand-holding that these sessions provide us all through Paths to Publications.
Well, I wish you all the best as well. And if you need anything from me, I'll share my contact info. And if you need anything, just please let me know then. Okay?
Sure, you
Everyone
can share your email here as well, Dr. Lewis, in the chat box.
Okay.
Thanks to all the audience, and thank you for your very valuable inputs. We look forward to having you all. We've got a comment here. People are following you on your LinkedIn.
Okay. Great, great.
Wonderful.
I'll share my email address as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Okay,
Catch
take
you at our
care.
next session. Bye-bye.